Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. By now you've probably seen the Moon Knight trailer, and I know you have a few questions. Today we're going to tackle a bit of a different topic, specifically who or what that giant freaky bird skeleton was. I'm going to give you the full history of the character from the comics, as well as how I think Marvel might make use of him in the show. Okay, so at the about 46-second mark of the trailer, while Marc Spector is boarding an elevator, the lights in the corridor flicker on and off, and a giant white figure appears out of nowhere. If you freeze the frames at the exact right time, you can see a few massive clues as to who this character is. The first thing that stands out is his massive skull, and even has a meter-long white beak at its end. Then you'll see he's draped in a white cloak, not too dissimilar from the very cloak that Moon Knight will inevitably wear, and he's also bound tightly with white cloth, as most mummies are. In his hand, he holds a staff, with a crescent moon symbol gilded on its very end. As you'll soon come to know, this is the Egyptian god of the moon, Khonshu, and the very being that grants Moon Knight his powers. Now, the comics go back and forth on this quite a bit, but basically when Moon Knight, also known as Marc Spector when his main personality is behind the wheel, was a mercenary, he was nearly killed by a treasure hunter called Raoul Bushman. While Spector wasted away, an Egyptian god descended to the physical realm and resurrected him, bringing him back to life as long as Spector promised to serve him, and granted him a permanent telepathic connection to the god. Khonshu regularly communed with Moon Knight through the years, directing him to fight crime or intervene in important events whenever he willed, although this is also disputed in the comics a time or two, depending on whoever is writing Moon Knight at the time and whether or not they want to lean into the supernatural aspects of the character or lean into the mental health aspects. They either claim Khonshu is just a made-up character in Marc Spector's mind, or he's an actual god. Whether or not the Khonshu that Moon Knight experiences is real or not, there is no doubt that there is a real Egyptian moon god running around the Marvel Universe. Just like there are Asgardian gods with Thor and Odin, as well as Olympian gods with Zeus and Hercules, the Marvel Universe contains just about every other pantheon in existence, and that includes the Egyptian gods. And the actual Khonshu from the Marvel Universe and the one that may or may not be talking to Moon Knight have more or less the same backstory. Khonshu was a secret Egyptian deity, probably the child of Atum, the Egyptian god of the sun, who was also known as Amon-Ra. Like all of the other Egyptian gods, he resided on Earth during its prehistory, and committed great deeds in front of early man, thus earning their worship. Khonshu's actual relationship in the Marvel Universe, like almost any other god that exists in the main 616 universe, is often rewritten and changed. At one point, instead of simply being one of the gods of Egypt, Khonshu was written as one of the elder gods, as an older supernatural version of deities that existed long before the earthly gods. We don't have many histories or stories of Khonshu's birth, or even stories that predate his arrival in Egypt, but we do know that once he tried to join the Stone Age Avengers, about 1,000,000 years before the Avengers as we know them existed. There was a group of supernatural heroes protecting Earth from cosmic threats. The team was originally composed of an ancient version of the Phoenix Force, Odin in his youth, Agamotto the Sorcerer, the very first Black Panther, Iron Fist, Starbrand, and Ghost Rider. That's quite a powerful team already, but Khonshu also wanted in on the fun. When they rejected him, Khonshu decided that he would make his own superhero, and that's how we got our first Moon Knight. Khonshu also created a cult that worshipped himself, which would lead to various religious sects and rituals that survived well into Marc Spector's day. Long after meeting the original Stone Avengers, Khonshu ended up in Egypt. At various times, the god dressed himself up as a mere mortal, sometimes going around town as a pharaoh, or at others slumming it as a mayor. Again, in the comics, you have to remember that Khonshu is supposed to be, at least at times, a god in the same sense that Thor and Balder are gods. It's only really in his interactions with the Moon Knight of our era, Marc Spector, that Khonshu comes across as a creepy, terrifying monster of sorts. Eventually, of course, Khonshu would go on to meet Spector, and much of what we know of the god is filtered through that hero. But before we talk about Khonshu in the modern age, it's important to note that it was during the ancient Egyptian age that Khonshu started to fight with his dad, or at least the guy that might be his dad, Atum, the god of the sun. You might want to remember this, because it's looking more and more likely that Ethan Hawke's character, the villain of the upcoming Moon Knight series, will actually be a baddie known as Sun King and not Arthur Harrow, which Marvel keeps trying to claim. By the time Khonshu saves Marc Spector's life, he had fully accepted this role of creepy, nightmarish god. And since Spector already suffered from dissociative identity disorder, Khonshu's frequent visions would push Moon Knight further and further away from reality, and ultimately fracture his mind. In recent years, Khonshu has become a villain at times. At one point, he absorbed the powers of Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, and a few others, and used it to transform New York City into an Egyptianish capital for his new empire. When it comes to the Disney Plus series, I really doubt that we're going to see anything more than the freaky version of the god that appears in the trailer, which is pretty faithful to the original 1980s comics and Mark Waid's classic run as well. Now, there's an off chance that the god might be used for comedic effect, much like Venom has been used in the Sony franchise, but I highly doubt it. Considering the Asgardians are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe along with the Eternals as well, Marvel is starting to have the same god problem they did in the comics. You know, because Odin is just supposed to be the Germanic interpretation of the king of the gods, just like Zeus is supposed to be the Greek version. Zeus and Odin are actually the same thing, it's just that different cultures came to name them differently. At least that's how Marvel likes to simplify the idea of gods in the Marvel Universe. But now that it looks like the Egyptian gods are an actual real thing in the MCU, they might run the risk of confusing some fans. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below.